Hey everybody, Professor Snart checking in again here as we get into day 2 of our course and already into Unit 2. So I'm just going to click into our due dates, see where we're at. So Tuesday, the very first day of the course, I had hoped people would finish the basically just the introductions unit to get the ball rolling here. So finishing the discussion board, the home page, so I've graded those. Pretty simple. If you followed the directions and did stuff that you were required to do, you got full points. So pretty straightforward to get us going. Our next unit is due Thursday, May 31st, so again right around the corner here, but it's a relatively straightforward unit, and the writing component is not that extensive. Obviously, one of the things you now want to be thinking about is how to manage your time, as far as, because the writing you're doing, unlike maybe for a discussion board or introducing yourself where you can just go in and kind of do it on the spot, for a lot of the creative writing we're doing, you obviously want to leave yourself time to work through drafts, to change things, to write something, let it sit, and go back to it. We are on a pretty compressed time frame here, but still, you want to give this kind of writing a lot more attention than you might the sort of immediate, like, introducing yourself type of discussion board post. So we have our first writing assignment from our book, The Creative Writer's Handbook. Ta-da! The first couple of chapters, then pages 1 through 39. Sounds like a lot, 40 pages, but it's actually, it reads very quickly. There's a lot of kind of anecdotal stuff, or quotes or that kind of stuff. Even a few illustrations throughout, so it's really not that much, and it reads quickly. It's in a style that's designed to be read fairly fast, and really it's largely about, like the title of the unit, working like a writer. Maybe thinking like a writer is a more useful term, although both are kind of the same, because you want to be consciously working like one too. But really thinking about a writer, or thinking like a writer, is a matter of having the mindset of not just how could I describe this thing, or like our first writing assignment here, framing a memory. It's not just so much describing the memory, but trying to see the significance or the importance of it, its meaning beyond just the surface. And that kind of habit of mind is really the habit of mind of a writer. It's thinking like a writer or working like a writer. So we want to get right into this idea of kind of treating the material of our lives and of the world that we're in a certain way, a certain mindset that we're bringing to it. And largely, again, it's about not just describing something with beautiful or evocative language, even if that language is shocking in some cases, but really to try to see the importance of something, its symbolic content, seeing below the surface. Seeing into the life of things is what the great poet Wordsworth called it, which is a really interesting phrase to think about in terms of thinking, working like a writer. The idea that things have a kind of life to them, and that interconnectedness of things. He developed it really as a kind of spiritual view of the world, and we're not interested in that so much, although it does become that for many people. It's really more just a matter of seeing beyond just the surface of things. And it doesn't need to be just objects of beauty or grandeur that we see, or huge moments in our lives, or in public life per se. But everything can have a life unto itself, and so it's part of the job of the writer to see the life in everything, really. Whether it's beautiful or ugly, and whether the writing itself is beautiful or ugly, to reflect that, we're still trying to see into the life of things. So this first assignment, framing a memory, is really just asking you to think and work like a writer, to think about a moment that was important for you, emotionally charged, to describe it in an evocative way using details, an appeal to the senses beyond just sight, which is kind of the one that everyone defaults to. And then the other part of this is kind of the thinking like a writer part, is to talk about why this memory of all that you could choose from seems important. Why did you choose this one, basically? What's its significance? What's the life inside of this memory? So it's relatively short. Again, it has a couple of little components here that you want to make sure you cover, and the requirement that you're responding to 2 other student posts, because we're doing this through the discussion board so we can share writing. But I really want to stress that you're not now just sitting down at the discussion board and writing this one time and hoping for the best. It really is a matter where you sit at your word processor, probably Word for most people, and you actually type this as if you were handing it in on a piece of paper. So you're not just using the first draft, you're making changes, edits, you're writing it, leaving it, coming back to it, all of the things that working like a writer really means. So it is a discussion board, but it doesn't mean you just jump in there in a really informal way and just kind of go off like you might have for the introduction, where it made more sense to do that. Okay, so don't let the medium of the discussion board guide how you're treating it. It's just, think of that as kind of irrelevant. It's just a convenient way of sharing writing among ourselves. The other part to Unit 2 then is much more the informal kind of discussion board, more traditional kind. I'm having you look at an interesting multimedia piece by Sonia Hubbard here, and it is an interesting kind of writing that I'm not even sure people have necessarily thought about, although we certainly should, given the presence of hypermedia in our lives and the web especially, but how you can write using this sort of multimedia genre. But really hers is a reflection on the writing process, the work of a writer, being a writer, and all that kind of stuff. And so we have a chance to use this discussion board to reflect on her ideas, but also how they might relate to ourselves as writers. So even if you don't consider yourself a writer, you've never really written anything seriously before, or it's been, decades or years since you've done so, even for just the course of our 5 weeks here, you really want to think about yourself as a writer, as someone who makes intentional choices about why this word and why not this word. Why do I choose this name for a character and not a different name? Why do I write in this genre and not another one? So sort of the overriding theme for our course is really making intentional choices about the craft of writing, not just, well, I did it this way because whatever, I don't have an answer for it. We really want to always have those kinds of answers. And if you think about it, the other way of saying that is that your reader, whether it's me, other people in the class, or really you want to think of just your work being in a magazine or a journal or a book somewhere, that someone who doesn't know you, doesn't have any of that context, just picks it up. That reader should get the sense that you could answer those questions, that you have invested time in the craft of writing, in the act of being intentional with your choices, because you sort of owe it to the reader to do that. They've been generous enough to invest the time to read it. You need to be generous and conscientious enough to invest time in the writing of it. So that, again, is all part of thinking and working like a writer. Okay, so I'll leave you then to move on to Unit 2. Be aware that Units 3 and 4 following will be due on the same day, so they really do come quickly, in part because we want to spend really the bulk of our time in the workshop units, and because of the way they're set up, they take a little bit more time than just these kind of one-off units would otherwise take. So be sure you're in there, be sure you are making conscious choices and following directions, and if you have any questions, just be in touch with me, and do so like right away so that we can get any technical or course things or just whatever cleared up as soon as possible.